Welcome back. The Bureau of Land Management manages 245 million acres of land and 700 million acres of underground mineral rights on a budget of $1.3 billion. And according to my next guest, the BLM is an unconstitutional threat to every American. KrisAnne Hall is a lawyer who travels the country giving lectures and holding seminars on the Constitution. So KrisAnne, I got bombarded on my Facebook page saying, you have to have this lady on. She is the best when it comes to speaking about the BLM and all the wrongs they do. So, my friend, you have a couple of minutes. Go to town.
Well, you know, it's the ignorance of the people, and I think we've slipped into the apathy of a nearly socialistic government these days, that we simply do not understand how our Constitution is supposed to work anymore. We think that government knows best, and government is our nanny and our caretaker and does everything best, and good citizens don't question government. And what we need to realize is that the powers that are delegated to the federal government are very few, and then the powers that are not delegated are reserved to the states. That is not my opinion. That is the text of the Constitution itself. And the power to manage land has not been delegated to the federal government, so it's a power reserved to the states. The only power delegated to the federal government is in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. That's for the 10-mile square of Washington, D.C., and the land that they purchase from the states at the consent of the states for ports, forts, dockyards, and things that are engaged in our defense and for foreign commerce.
Well, let me ask you.
Let me reserved to the states. I
want to ask you a question. I want to go specific to the Bundys and the Hammonds and the Finnecums. I mean, each one, and we just did a report last week, KrisAnne, on the fact that we played this video of the people from the government bragging about how they're almost stealing land from American citizens. How are they getting away with that if it's not constitutional?
Well, it's because we have congressmen. We don't require constitutional aptitude as a requirement for election to office anymore. And we have slipped into, over the last decades, into this sort of judicial supremacy mindset, which breeds a federal supremacy. So everybody that argues that the federal government has the authority to own this land doesn't do so by quoting the Constitution. They do so by quoting Supreme Court cases. This idea that we are somehow ruled by an oligarchy of 9 kings and queens that can expand the authority of the federal government and limit the power of the state.
So when you take a look, I mean, you can take a look at any one of any one of these homes or these ranches that they take over. What you're saying is that they're actually there and they're putting management fees forward, that this is completely 110% unconstitutional, and that the Bundys have every leg to stand on?
Absolutely. There is no, remember, if it is not delegated to the federal government, they don't have it. And the only power delegated specifically to the federal government over land is the 10 square miles for Washington, D.C., and the land purchased from the states for forts, ports, and magazines, and are these needful buildings that are associated with the defense of the Union and the commerce of 2 foreign nations. Everything else is reserved to the states, which means that if the federal government is exercising a power over this land, it is not constitutional. What we don't realize, Dennis, is that these farmers and ranchers have been fighting for their land for over 50 years now. They've been playing in the federal court system. People need to look at this. If the BLM is taking your land, Dennis, you don't sue them in a regular common law court. You argue with them in an administrative law court that is set up by the BLM or the FDA or the EPA, set up by judges who are hired and paid by the agencies to make sure that the agencies are following their rules. And time again, we are seeing these courts ruling in favor of the landowners only to see the federal government expand and redefine their own terms and then taking more land from the people. It's happening in Red River, Texas right now. We have land in Nevada that has been taken for a preserve, that the BLM is now bragging about that they're going to be selling the mineral rights to this land. Remember, they took it under the auspices that they were going to be holding this land for nature preserves.
Chris-Ann, I have to cut you off because we're out of time. But listen, you got to get back to me. I'll email you later. We've got to have you on for a longer segment.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll have you back next week.
Great. Sounds great.
Thanks so much. Great job.